So, next chapter, the process. You're in the magic kingdom. You're through your little ups and downs, and things kind of smooth out to a point of stability. So now it's time for some new things. So again, probably in it's actually a couple months after the summer, I was called over again, and it was kind of a quiet time in the community. Not so many guests and whatnot. And I walked into the ranch and into the living room space where he was. And again, there's always staff members or a community member, maybe a guest. There's always an element of an entourage there. And it was just kind of a very cozy kind of feeling. And it was late in the day. It was maybe like around, I don't know, 4:30, 5 o'clock ish. And he says, indicates to me, okay, do his numbers, do her numbers, whatever. And I started doing that. And so that went on for maybe like a half hour, 45 minutes or so. It was very in depth. And again, after that kind of that turning point, that rounding that curve, I was really getting it. It was just kind of like my energy, my frequency, my whatever had just sort of come to a new level, uh, synchronized with him, or however you want to word it, that I was really understanding what he was saying. And I felt very relieved and also felt very happy, like, okay, I'm making some progress here. I'm getting this information together. And in sort of the arc of the idea of the book, I'm going to, in future time and space, have something to write about. So that was great. So then the energy starts, winding down far as the space. I'm gathering up my notes and papers, and I hear Yogi Bhajan. He was just in a very good mood, and as I'm gathering my things together, I hear him say, "We have to feed her," and I thought, "Oh boy, this is just like the greatest," and I can sense that I'm going to get to go out to eat with Yogi Bhajan and his inner circle staff people. And, this has never happened before. This is just going to be wonderful. So, so I'm just so happy. So anyway, everybody's kind of, getting ready. There's, a discussion, which restaurant are we going to go to? And there was only like half a dozen of us. And I thought, oh boy, I'm going to get to sit at the same table as him. And this is just going to be so cozy. And just, I just feel so special. So we all kind of get into the cars and go to the restaurant. It's just some little local restaurant, and it wasn't very busy. And we got this table, and Yogi Bhajan's sitting at the head of the table. He's got a staff member next to him, and I'm one person over. I'm like, oh, I'm just so happy. Then what happens? He turns to one of his staff people and he says, "Call the businesses and invite them over." And I'm going, damn it, all those people, because there was a lot of businesses back then. I thought, well, whatever. I'm sitting next to him, so I'm okay. So the people start piling in. And it was one of those days, maybe you've had a day like where you skipped lunch. So when it comes to dinner, like you're really hungry. And I'm looking at the menu and go, oh, this tofu dish. I'm so hungry. And my blood sugar was kind of low. I can't wait to eat this tofu dish. This is just the greatest thing in the world. Okay. So the people start coming in. And as soon as the people start coming in, Yogi Bhajan turns to me and he says, "Do her numbers." And I'm like, okay, I could do one or two people's numbers. I can manage that. But then I do those numbers. And then he says, "Do his numbers." And all of a sudden my intuition said, Nam Hari, he's not going to let you eat. He's going to have you doing people's numbers back to back until it's time to go. And I had like a little bit of a panic attack because I was kind of like, I'm so hungry. My blood sugar is so low. I don't want to look like an idiot in front of all of these staff members and, heads of department and CEOs or whatever. So I started praying to Guru Ram Das. And I said, Guru Ram Das, what should I do? And what came through was I just heard the message, order 2 Coca-Colas and you'll be okay. And that kind of made sense because I wasn't going to have time to eat anything. I wasn't going to have time to chew. I had to keep talking. And, Coca-Cola, it has the sugar, it's had the caffeine. I thought, Okay, I can drink 2 Coca-Colas and I'll just like sleep it off the next morning. Okay. So I did that. And that was a smart move because then I was just going to be able to sip my Coca-Cola and keep talking. Okay. Then at one point of this hour plus long dinner, he says to me, do her numbers and tell her when she's supposed to get married. And I was thinking, what? It's kind of like, I'm thinking in my own mind, I don't want to tell anybody when they're supposed to get married. I mean, I don't want that responsibility. Are you kidding me? Marriage, like, that's one of the most important decisions whenever, I'm not saying anything, but I'm doing the numbers and I'm kind of, in a very roundabout way, I'm looking at the time cycles and whatnot and referring it to her chart and going, well, if you wanted to get married this month or this month, could be a good time. And then Yogi Bhajan starts yelling at me. And again, in that Mahan Tantric voice, he's going, tell her, tell her. And then I got like a little more, emphatic of like, well, if you think it's a good idea, la la la, or you could wait till next year. I was trying to like emphasize like the whole next year thing, and then you have time to think about it. Well, Yogi Bhajan just wasn't having it. And again, he starts in this laser beam way. Tell her, tell her. Everybody's turning their head. And so I kind of coughed up a little bit more, direct, but still honestly, wasn't really coming close to what he wanted. Because personally, I just didn't feel comfortable doing that. Okay. So anyway, then it switched to somebody else and I was kind of out of the hot seat and whatever. Didn't get to eat any food, just got to finish my Coca-Colas. And boy, I was tired because that just like took a lot of higher brain energy. And the Coca-Colas were kind of wearing off. And so I just went to sleep. So I wake up the next morning. I felt like I had been hit by a Mack truck. I had no energy. My back was like aching. Like this emotional cavity had been opened up, and all of this pain from my childhood was pouring out. I literally felt like I was like in an altered state, and it was just enough for me to kind of function getting around the house, drinking water, resting, extraordinarily tired. But then all of a sudden, as if almost like magic, at just before 4 o'clock, when I had to go teach that yoga class and be in Santa Fe, all bright eyed at 5, I had just enough energy to get it together, get dressed up, safely drive in, teach the class, be cognizant, be present, okay? Come back. As soon as I got back and shut the door, back in the emotional coal mines. I was going through this huge release, and it's a healing release because of the energy of a master of Kundalini Yoga and the Mahan Tantric had released something. And so this process, we'll call it, went on for almost a week. And towards the end of the week, I was actually getting like a little scared, like, am I ever going to come out of this? Fortunately, after about a week, it ebbed out and a huge chunk of whatever had released, okay? And I started coming back into my normal energy. My point in all this is that in working with a spiritual master, he's teaching you things, but that's actually almost the smallest part of the equation. Because he's working on you and your capacity to carry these teachings into the future and not have some kind of nervous breakdown that you might have normally had, okay? Or some kind of mental or emotional freak out, which does happen. It happens to people. There's no judgment, okay? But as a master, he is watching over you and he is caring and concerned for every part of your being, Not just the intellectual, like, is this person getting it? Is this person going to carry something to the destination, to the destiny that has to be achieved? And this is something that I realized months later after this episode. And to be honest with you, I don't think I would be alive today if not for that healing gift. And I'm very grateful for that moment, for the pain that it released, and the clearing for me as a human, as a woman of God, to have a chance in this world as a good life. So thank you. Now I'm at about the 2 to 3 year mark of studying with Yogi Bhajan, being called over to the ranch intermittently. There was never an exact schedule because, he would travel quite a bit. But then in the later 1990s, because of health concerns, he didn't travel so much. So there was more quality time at that time. So after kind of like 2.5 to 3 years, I was called over again, over to the ranch, and I was, at that point feeling like pretty good, like I'm getting this. This is kind of very incremental, step by step, more of the esoteric understanding of things along parallel with the linear. So I was there, again, in kind of the main living room area. He's in the recliner. I'm always sitting on the floor. But this was kind of more of this session was not me doing people's numbers. It was actually more like I'm having questions, and then he's sharing information with me and sort of really expanding upon like the fine tuning of things and the fine points. And it was one of those moments where you just felt like so connected with someone, like I'm really getting it, and I'm really feeling like, God, I'm getting the gems and the jewels and the pearls of wisdom of the universe, and I'm jotting things down, and I'm just totally, synchronized with his energy, and it's like there's no one else in the room, and other people are just kind of like, standing back and listening. Then, during that process, all of a sudden, a voice comes from the other room, coming into the living room, and boldly announces, "Sir, I've got new shoes." And I turn my head, and there's City Huddy car carrying half a dozen designer bags of stuff. And I'm thinking, what? And Yogi Bhajan turns to her in a very fatherly and gentle tone of voice and says, "Let's see your new shoes." And I'm sitting there like, what? Like this big stone has come in and displaced the water of all my cosmic connectivity for shoes? And I just don't say anything. I just kind of keep my cool. So she comes in and she's unloading the boxes and showing the shoes, and Yogi Bhajan says something, oh, very nice, but I could see it's not going to end at the shoes. There's still more boxes of stuff to look at from this shopping spree. And I'm sitting there not saying anything, basically like with steam coming out of my ears, like, okay, Nam Hari, just like keep it together. Like, don't react. Okay, you're not in control here. There's a whole flow, and who knows why things happen sometimes. But after a certain point, I could see that the whole shopping spree energy has sort of overtaken and displaced the tutorial that I'm having with Yogi Bhajan. So Harinam, again, always dialed in, just kind of indicates to me like, okay, your turn is over. Time for you to go. She'd always keep the energy moving. Okay. So I kind of gathered my stuff, and I look up at Yogi Bhajan, and he just kind of gives me this kind of gentle smile, kind of like with a twinkle in his eye, like he understands how I feel. And I sort of muster kind of a, thank you for today, and get my stuff and my leave. Okay. Then again, I'm walking down that long dirt road from the ranch to the gate, thinking of all the injustices in the universe. How could this happen? How could my cosmic magic moment get displaced by new shoes? And I'm just like, the steam is really coming out of my ears. So I get back home, I drink some water, I kind of decompress a little bit. And then, fortunately, a few days later, instead of like a few weeks like it normally took in the past, I was able to come to a point of peace with it all. And something inside me said, Nam Hari, don't judge. Okay? You think it's this or that. You think your thing is more important. And maybe it is to you. But in the whole flow of the space and in the perception of the master, you never know what actually needs to happen. And you never know what another human being may need at that exact moment. And you don't need to judge what someone else's needs are. That may be just the exact thing that person needs that's going to help them along, whether you understand it or not. And that was a real turning point for me, because after coming up on 3 years of being in that environment and seeing the way Yogi Bhajan would deal with so many people. And I can't even tell you the times, because after a certain point I was kind of allowed to like hang out longer besides just the tutorial. I'd sort of gain some trust or whatever you might want to call it with Namkar. I was just like, okay, we just don't opt you out instantly. I would see just the whole panorama of the scene. And so many times I would see people come to Yogi Bhajan and drop their broken life at his feet and say, Sir, fix it for me. And so many times I witnessed him saying, okay, we'll move you into this person's back porch for the summer. We'll get you this job. I'll send your kids to this summer camp. And he would take sometimes the most disastrous situations that people had gotten themselves into and create a road of healing for that person so they could find their way again, so they could reamalgamate themselves and be able to stand on their own feet. It was a fascinating process to witness. Sometimes, not often, but sometimes Yogi Bhajan would do direct healing on a person. And I remember one time I was over there and my tutorial session with him kind of wound down, and that somebody was scheduled, one of his students was scheduled to come over to be healed by him for something in her rib cage and her breathing. Okay. And Yogi Bhajan had actually just been through, this was like later in the process, kind of a health episode. His health wasn't so great yet. He's starting to get into the late 1990s, the angioplasties, just, he was really just sometimes, running on this kind of a not optimum system, let's say. And I noticed that. I noticed like his energy just, wasn't what it usually was at that particular moment that day. But this student came over for this healing, and I just happened to be sitting on the floor, and there's other people sitting around in the chairs and whatnot. And Yogi Bhajan was sitting up in the recliner chair, and he said, "Okay, lie down on the floor," and he had her head towards him, and I was like, if I reached out, I could touch her. I was like incredibly close to the space. And he had her say, he says, start breathing. Just, inhale and exhale. It seemed like he was trying to get her to get kind of a connection like to her breath and the energy of the breath and having some control of it. Okay. And then after she did that, like for a minute or two, he's sitting in the chair and he leaned over and he put both his palms flat on her rib cage. And he said, okay, I want you to inhale and I want you to exhale. So she did that a few times and he said, okay, inhale really big and then exhale. When she exhaled, he pushed down, okay? And she went, and then after that happened, he leaned back, was sitting up in the chair, and I looked at his face and he looked exhausted. And I realized on a psychic pranic level what that took out of him. To basically, it seemed like he was exhuming something out of her lungs. My guess, it was grief, okay, because the lungs are connected to grief. And that his pranic force and healing energy pushed out what may have taken years of yoga or meditation or even lifetimes. Who knows? We don't know those kinds of things. And I just sat there marveling at the level of sacrifice that he is taking from his own energy to help another human being so they have a chance in their life. And I witnessed this kind of exchange, not so much on the physical healing level, but just in other ways or through dialogue or whatever, that he was always looking towards the health, the healing, the future, and whether he would give someone a particular job to do, meditation to do, prayer to do, poti of japshi. It was all directed at them being able to create what's called diagonal energy, and that's the energy of Kundalini Yoga and the ability to cut through the blocks, clear the karma, and heal themselves. That is all I ever witnessed of his presence and performance and his legacy to help humanity. And I feel very grateful to have been a part of that and to be able to witness that. So, now, the book. I've been studying about 3.5, 4 years with him. And I felt like I had enough of a body of information to work with to write the book. And Yogi Bhajan gave me 2 directives as to the content or the spirit of the book. The first directive was leave the religion out. I think he wanted it to be relatable to the general public. And the second directive was make it so everyone can understand it. So I felt like he wanted me not to get too esoteric, too, fourth blue ether and beyond kind of space, and keep it practical. So I really took that to heart. So it was the beginning of 1997, and I didn't have a computer. And I think that was back more in the early days of computers and whatnot. I thought, well, if I'm going to write a book, I better get a computer. And at that moment in my life, I had exactly $600 extra to spend to buy a computer, which is not a lot of money, but I put this prayer energy around, and I thought, Guru, if you want this to happen, let me find a good enough computer to write a book on for $600. So I drove into Santa Fe. I went to Office Depot. I started walking down the aisle. I see all the computers. I'm starting at one end, $3,000, $2,000, $1,800. And I'm going, this is not going to work. And finally, at the very end, I see this closeout computer. I don't even remember the brand name. Apparently, it was the last one, and it was $599. And I thought, that's my computer. And quite honestly, I had this feeling, because I was kind of like putting off like for a couple of weeks going, because I just felt intimidated by the whole process of computers. I really felt like that computer was just like being held in trust for me. Like nobody else could get that computer. Nobody else could buy it. Nobody could get that last computer that had been marked down to just basically get it out of the showroom. So I got the computer, I came home, I got someone in the community to give me some tutorial lessons on how to figure this puppy out, and I started writing the book. Let me tell you something. Writing a book is not easy. Okay? It was a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be just because it takes so much time. Like you think like, "Oh, I could write 10 pages a day." Oh my god, if you could write one or two good like perfect copy pages, that's pretty darn good. And you can only spend so many hours working on it, otherwise your brain gets kind of fuzzy. So I was working on it, chipping away, going, chapter to chapter, how can people understand this? What's the right languaging? What's enough? What's too much? What's the kind of what the median point, so to speak. And sometimes you get like a little fuzzy in the brain when you're dealing with all these kind of concepts and how to language things, or you want it to be really exact, because I really wanted it to honor the system, the teachings, and I wanted to honor Yogi Bhajan. Okay, and it was during the winter, and Yogi Bhajan typically would travel in the winter, so he was not available to check in with. And sometimes I'd be sitting there, and it kind of like, I need like a clarification on this. I need to kind of like make sure I'm getting this right. So what I did was I had it in my office space. I had my computer, and then just to the right, at exact eye level, I had the Trodicum photo, which is the meditation photo, the black and white photo of Yogi Bhajan when he's in that really high, pristine, pure space of the Mahantantric photo. It's a very powerful photo. So whenever I was not quite sure about something or felt like a little help here, I'd turn my head, I'd look at the photo, and whew, the answer would come right through. The right languaging, the clarity, the precision. So that Trodicum photo was very much a part of the process of getting these teachings, clarified, exactly right, all good. So that was wonderful. Okay. So then, when you write a book, you need an editor, because editing is a whole nother planet. Okay, so I went to Florida. I stayed in the community there at the lovely Altamont Springs ashram, and then someone who was a student, a yoga student in the community, just happened to have the spare time and energy to work with me for a month, and it did take a month to go through everything and get it properly edited to be ready to print. So then I came back in from Florida. Came back at some point in May. I got it taken because my goal was to have it ready for summer solstice that year. I didn't realize what kind of a goal I'd set for myself. So, and I had to do a self-publishing because that was the only way it's going to make it happen. So I went to Alpha Graphics in Santa Fe, worked with Julie there, and got everything all set up. And it wasn't looking like they could have it finished, have it actually printed. I wanted 500 books for summer solstice. She said it wasn't in the schedule, but boy, some angel must have whispered in her ear, because she said, "You know what, Nam Hari, I'm going to bump another job for you and move that out of the way, and I'm going to get your job, your print job, done before summer solstice start." I was very grateful for that. So, the day before summer solstice that year, 97, I'm driving into Santa Fe. I go to Alpha Graphics. The guys load up the books in the back of the car, and I'm driving back to Espanola. And as I pass Nambe, and I'm kind of coming up that hill, and I'm feeling like so relieved, like, oh, good, I did this. I finished the book. I did what he told me to do. And it's also going to be ready for summer solstice. And isn't that the greatest? All of a sudden, it came to me that he had me write the book that I was initially looking for when he sent me into Santa Fe to read those books on numerology. And I suddenly had the experience of the scope of a spiritual master and what he sees needs to happen, and the process that you need to go through to get there. And as much as you go through your individual, I don't get this, you don't get this, I'm not happy, the whole time, he's putting out the little breadcrumbs for you to get to the next step. It was one of the most powerful moments in my life, and I'm so grateful.